Savannah, I got this cordless mic. Can you cut her on, the one that was on the front pew? Because I'll knock this over before the night's out. How about that? It's Billy turned it on, so if it doesn't work, it's his fault. Okay. All right. Yeah, Paul texted me yesterday and said he needed somebody to cover for him tonight. And of course, first thing went to my mind was, well, he must have asked everybody else if he's texting me to come do this. Um, I, this is one of the few times I actually enjoy being able to get up here. Okay, and so I was trying to come up with something last minute, and um, I usually like a 48 hours, but I didn't get 48 hours, so you're stuck. It's sort of like Billy's Sunday school class. I try to fill in for him sometimes, and it's like the graduate student going behind the professor, the learned and tenured professor. And so you've got an amateur up there trying to do what a professional does. So that's sort of where I'm at. I don't have the ability to deliver and illustrate like Billy, and I don't have the smooth, debonair presentation that Sean does. So you're stuck. And but the one benefit to this is going to be a lot like getting a substitute teacher at school. I'm not going to bear down on you tonight, okay? I'm not going to be hard on you, and I'm not going to keep you to 7 o'clock. 6:55 maybe, but anyway. Psalms. It's hard to go wrong in Psalms. I mean, you can go a lot of places in Scripture, and everybody's got their favorite, but I tell you, when you have to come up with something at the last minute, Psalms is the place to go to, and I've had to do it a time or two over the years. I remember back when oh Lord, this was in the mid to late 90s. When Doug was here, we were getting ready for training union one night, or been to training union. Somebody called and said they need somebody to fill in tonight at First Baptist, or fill in at First Baptist. I said, well, okay, what day? They said tonight. And I'm looking at my watch, and they said, you got 15 minutes. So it's not unusual to get called on at the last minute. And two, it's when you get up in front of folks, one of the things I've always tried to remind myself over the years about trying to find some humility is I've got a face made for radio and a voice made for silent movies. And I prove that every Friday night during the football games when Big Marshall and I are sitting up there trying to fill 2.5 hours of airtime. So one of the things that came to mind to me today was my granddaddy Odom, Mac Odom. He had, and when you're growing up as a kid, you hear adults that will use phrases or they'll say something that you never forget. And one of the things that he would always say would be, pshaw. Now, I don't know how you spell that. I'm thinking it's P-S-H-A-W, but that's what my granddad. And the other thing he would say, a phrase he would use was called heifer dust. And that stuck with me so bad, I catch myself using it all the time. And so, as an example, this week has turned to heifer dust. Everything I've touched is just puffed up. I mean, it doesn't matter what I've tried to do. When I left home this morning going to the office, I knew that I had a meeting at 5 o'clock, and we usually get out 20 or 30 minutes. Well, of course, tonight it ran 45 minutes. And before I left the office, I'd realized I didn't pick my Bible up off the dresser. And so at the office, I was trying, I got to do. So fortunately, I've got a big box full of study books and stuff over there. So I dug out, and we'll get to practice the King's English tonight in the King James Version. But there's a lot of stuff that we all get upset and worried about every day. I mean, today, that's one of the reasons I don't watch news anymore is they yell at one another and they call one another names. I mean, somebody's a communist or somebody's a Nazi or somebody's a fascist or somebody's an idiot. And just tell me what happened today. You don't get into all of that, and don't get to arguing and carrying on about stuff. I mean, it's just, you just get to the point that you think the whole world's gone to heifer dust. And when you get right down to it, it really hadn't. It really hadn't. I mean, there's lots of bad stuff that happen out there, but there's lots of good stuff that happens too. And you don't get to hear about that much because nobody wants to know about the plane crash and how many heads rolled across the interstate, what body parts they found 6 states over. You don't get to hear about just the common everyday things. And so we find ourselves in a frame of mind that's like, all we do is we just dwell on negative things. And most of this comes from people that's what they live to do. I mean, if you think about how many people do you know that you really don't want to run into in Walmart, because when you leave, you're going to be ready to run out 63 and jump off a river bridge. I mean, I know folks like that. And then there's other folks that when you run into them and you've been there 15 minutes in the Coke and Pepsi aisle there, and you look up thinking, where'd the time go? And you had 15 or 20 minutes you wanted to spend in Walmart, and you wind up spending 35 or 40 minutes because you enjoy visiting with them. And so it's the positive things in life that I think we all fall short on, and we tend to focus on that. I've never been so glad in my life to live in the state of Mississippi this week. I look at what they got going on in other places and hear bits and pieces and some of the folks that they're electing or whatever, and I'm like, I'm sure glad I live in Wayne County, Mississippi. We don't have to worry with that or put up with it, you know. I mean, it's just trying to find something positive every day sometimes can be a tough thing. And a lot of folks fight depression, and so they forget about these good things. So here in Psalm 19, we're going to go through this and find a spot or two and talk about a couple of things. But the 19th Psalm, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night uttereth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there's nothing hid from the heat thereof. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. You know, here in this Psalm of David, I think about a lot of the stuff that I do see. Where I get most of my news and stuff is looking at some websites, okay? And some of them I see are like science-based, because I've always had a fascination with things out in space. It's something that when I was a little, back around 65 or 67, Mama got me signed up for this membership with NASA, and they would send you every month. They'd send you a book, and it was based on astronomy and some other things. And space program was big then, and Saturn rockets and all that sort of stuff. And every once in a while, you could get a model you'd put together for like $2, and they'd send you a Saturn V rocket with a capsule on top of it. You could sit home and glue it together. A lot of kids now don't know what it was like to buy those model kits, aircraft carriers and airplanes, and you'd put them all together. Some of it you'd have to glue, and then it had the decals with it, and that was always, for me, the hardest part. I could put any of it together, but trying to soak those pages in the water and slide that decal off without double folding it and it getting so flat you couldn't ever get it straightened out. So you'd have an airplane that you'd be putting together like an F-6 Crusader that was a famous plane back in the late 50s and through the into the 70s, and you wouldn't know who it belonged to because you didn't know if it was the U.S. or the Russians because I messed the decals up. But in seeing all those things, I just got a fascination of those things that are out there. Recently, they've had this ruckus about this comet that is coming through, and it's long. It's like the Empire State Building. It's a big, long thing. It's X number of miles long, and it's changed colors. It's blue, and it shouldn't be blue. It's not blue. It can't be blue. It's got to be green or red. And so there's all these people putting things on the internet about there's aliens, and it's got windows and doors in it, and it's got a motor because now it's speeded up, and it's not gravitationally related. It's headed to the backside of the sun back there. And, of course, my physics is sort of limited, but I understood the way they got satellites and other things into place sometimes and would be to sling them around the moon or sling them around the sun and pick up some speed. So there's all these folks that are all caught up in this. And when you look at in Psalms here, how does that tie to this? It says that the Lord sets throughout the line has gone out through, and the words to the end of the world. In them he hath set a tabernacle for the sun. God built a place for the sun. He built a place for the sun. And he built a place for us. And every time I look at all these pictures from the James Webb and the Hubble telescope, and they show all these things out there, and you see all these galaxies, just millions and millions of galaxies and trillions of stars, and people are wondering, well, is there life out there? I don't know. But God created it like that. He made everything to have a place. And all these people that have all these ideas, it's like, they come back and talk to us about, the dinosaurs. Were the dinosaurs real? Well, yeah. They've dug up their old bones. They were here at one point in time. And it's like, well, the world can't be 6,000 years old. Really? You mean the God that made all those galaxies and put all those stars and built a tabernacle for the sun and put us out there outside of it, he couldn't have made something old already? Why does it have to be new? I mean, the Lord made it like it is. And people fret over that kind of thing. Well, I don't know why you believe in these tales and myths. Well, why did God make things the way he did? I don't know, but I know it's pretty to look at. A lot of joy in it. And I know somewhere on the backside of that is a place where I'm headed. And it won't take me 100 million light years to get there either. When I leave here, I'll be there. And there'll be other suns or stars or places that I'll get a chance to see on the way. Everything has its place. And so the Lord is saying, it's like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. Looking back after we get married, I don't know that we look back with rejoicing that we got married, do we? I mean, people, we're just sort of kidding here, but I mean, we make a lot of jokes about, well, if I had to do over again, I'd have probably been absent or had a different date that particular night because I've been nailed down for the last 35 or 40 years, Yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and doing what you're told. But you think about it. How many times do you see a bridegroom that's not happy? Or especially a bride that's not happy? There's that joy we tend to let that kind of get away from us. We forget about the joy and newness. And the Lord is saying, that everything I've done is for you to make you happy. Give you something to see, something to look at, something to have faith in. Now, he gets down into the short rows here now in these next few verses. David says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. I didn't know much about Charlie Kirk. To tell you the truth, I'm too old, all right? He's a younger guy. And so I read a little about Turning Point. I'd seen where they popped up in politics, and there was a bunch of folks mad at them. So I figured they had to be doing something good if you had that many crazy people mad at them, okay? And so as I began to watch some of the things that he did and said, I kept thinking, this guy's pretty sharp. He knows his Bible, and he knows what his relationship with the Lord is. And watching him debate some of these, I hate to even call them kids, these college students. I mean, we tend to do that sometimes, but you think about it. There was a ton of boys, Mr. Audi, that climbed off, got onto those ships, and climbed into those airplanes, and toted rifles in neck-deep water that were 18 and 19 years old. I don't think they were kids. They were grown men. And if they were kids when they went in, it didn't take them long to become men. And so when I see some of these folks, I mean, my memories of college sometimes are a little fuzzy because of time, not because of any particular activity. But some of the things I do remember was they're doing stuff that I'm like, why are you there? Why are you in school? I was in school instead of the Army. I was in school because Miss Ruth told me I was going to school. My Uncle Buddy had me lined up to go to Fort Rucker and learn how to fly helicopters upside down. And when you're 18 years old, you're thinking, hot dog, and it's got guns and rockets on it. I can shoot stuff. Miss Ruth got wind of it and said, no, you're not. You're going to school, because none of us made it, very few of us made it through high school. You're going to go to college, son. And I did exactly what Miss Ruth said. Now, Uncle Buddy, he retired as a master sergeant, and he had connections. Told me, he said, I got you lined up. Said, when you graduate, you'll go to induction center. You get your basic. And he said, I got some fellows that are going to be hollering for you to come to Fort Rucker. And there was. I don't know where I'd have been if I'd have wound up. I probably would have wound up in a place I didn't need to be if I was flying upside down. But I remember from college, I mean, they taught us a lot of stuff that we had to regurgitate that I didn't think necessarily were true. All this stuff about the earth being millions of years old, that conflicted with my Christian beliefs. But now I just went ahead and regurgitated what they told me because that was the thing to do. But I also worked 2 jobs. I had a job on campus and worked down here with Wayne Allen at a sawmill down by the river. And so I see some of these college students, and I'm like, don't you need to get a job rather than stand around and say some of this stuff that you spout off? Because you don't have any idea what it's like off campus. Apparently, your mom and daddy didn't make you do a whole lot before you got here, and you're paying $100,000 a year to act stupid. Or your parents are. I got out of school owing $1,264 and had no clue how I was going to pay it back. After 4 years, I owed $1,264, and I said, I got to go get a job because the take-back man's going to come take my diploma back if I don't start paying this off. And right here, this scripture, it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony is sure, making wise the simple. When I listen to these people that were debating Kirk, I keep thinking, he's telling you the most simple explanation for things, and you're trying to complicate it. You're trying to make use some argument to sound edgy. The thing that I thought was funny was when one girl got up there and said, well, you're not educated. You didn't go to college. And, Kirk didn't go. He went for a short time, but then left. But I'm thinking, why is it that he's stupid because he didn't pay $100,000 a year to get a degree that you can never get a job for, that you'd ever hope to pay back the interest on the loans you got? I mean, here's a guy that started an organization, built a company, and has got hundreds of people working for him, and you're saying he's uneducated? I'll never forget one time, we ran into a fellow one time, and several of us, this was back in my oil field days, and we were sitting around talking about some stuff, and this guy had an Ivy League degree. And so he's sitting there, and he's talking about whatever it was, Yale or Harvard, where it was he went. And I told him, this is a true story. He was talking about bragging on Harvard and Yale and stuff, and I said, well, I got a scholarship offer from Harvard. And he just looked at me. I mean, because the way I sound, I've got a 2-digit IQ, okay? And some of y'all sound like you've got a 2-digit IQ too. But mine is particularly pronounced, and I understand that. But he looked at me and he said, well, I don't believe that. And I said, well, Mama kept a letter in the scrapbook at the house. I said, well, how in the world did that happen? I said, well, I don't know. We took ACT, and I made a pretty fair score on it. And so I didn't ask them for it. Didn't have any interest in Harvard, but I got the letter. I said, now how they found me in Waynesboro, Mississippi, I don't know. Well, he went on to talk about all the benefits of his Ivy League education. And some of y'all that's known me for a long time, my sarcasm level started going up. And he got to a point, and I said, well, buddy, let me ask you a question. How much does a gallon of water weigh at Harvard? And he just sort of looked at me. Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. And I said, well, how much does a gallon of water weigh at Harvard? Well, I don't know. I said, well, I can tell you what it weighed at Mississippi State. It weighed 8.34 pounds per gallon. And my guess is it weighs the same thing at Harvard. And I spent about 1/10 to learn that you spent at the Ivy League school. And I said, you're the kind of fellas, if I handed a handful of cockleburrs to and told you they were porcupine eggs, you'd believe them, wouldn't you? And of course, the conversation kind of got off downhill just a little. But my point being is that you can, as Jerry Clower said, you can be educated beyond your intelligence. And a lot of folks see sorry. And the law of the Lord, it's perfect. When you read Scripture, you're reading something that's perfect. It's perfect. It's the perfect way to live. Let me move on quickly here. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. How often do we look at somebody's lifestyle or something that they've gotten into and we understand they don't have a clue? They don't have a clue about what's right. I mean, one of the things I admired about Kirk was he didn't back up from anything that he believed. And there was a girl that was telling him that about abortion. And I'd sort of had this thought over the years, well, I'm opposed to abortion too, unless it's, rape, incest, or the death of, or would be the death of the mother. Until it dawned on me that Billy Graham had a singer that sang with him for years. You remember Ethel Waters singing His Eyes on the Sparrow? Now, you younger folks not going to remember that, but now that was a big, rotund black lady that could sing, and the angels of heaven would stop and listen to her. And she would sing that song, and you know how she was conceived? By rape. And one of the things Kirk would say, so you're saying that in order to justify or to make amends for a wrong, that you kill a baby, you kill a human. And I know there's if she doesn't want it, why would you make her carry it? And Charlie said, I'm just asking you. So you're saying that 2 wrongs make a right. That act, and then you turn around or somebody turns around and kills a baby, that's justified. And I said, he's right. He's right about that. Because when we're conceived at the instant that DNA is joined together. That's us. And he told this girl that, and she was just like, no, you can't argue that with me. He said, I'm not arguing. He said, I'm just telling you science. When your mother's egg was fertilized, everything that you are, your hair color, how tall you are, how many teeth you're going to have, how many teeth you're not going to have, tall, short, whatever. He said, when that DNA goes together, that's you. All you do from that point is get bigger. And in hearing that, I'm thinking, that's the statute of the Lord, because he said, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. That's the statute from God, and it's right. Let me move quickly on here. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More desired are they than gold, yea, more than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and honeycomb. How many folks do you see that got lots of money and no happiness? Now, a lot of money would make me happy. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that. If they hauled a truckload of quarters to my house, you would not hear me outside hollering at them about rutting the yard or, it's all loose change. My response would be, boys, back her up right over there. dump it out. Get you a couple of handfuls before you leave, because you may want to get a cup of coffee or get you a Coke or something. But thank you for bringing it. But there's folks that have piles and piles of quarters and they got no joy. None in their life. And you look at them sometimes and you think, I'm sure glad I don't have to live like that. You know, I get my light bill paid every month, buy some groceries, can buy a few clothes along, got a dry place and place that's cool in the summer and warm in the winter. How much better can you get than that? You're able to get up out of bed in the morning. And here, David is saying, these are the things that we ought to be desiring. Because what happens with the other stuff that you have? When you die, how much of it do you take with you? Zero. All right, what about the old boy that browbeat his wife and wouldn't let her have any money all those years, and he had said that, you know, that when he died, he was going to make sure that all his money went somewhere else, and he had a bunch of cash stowed in a safe there in the house. And so they got him to the funeral home, got him laid out. His wife walks up, and he had just put in his will that he was going to take all his money with him, and he wanted all that money stuffed in the coffin. And so his wife goes up to the casket, throws something in there, looks sort of like a note, and she said, "All right, go ahead and close the lid on the coffin." So the funeral home folks did, and she turned to walk off, and the guy said, "That was mighty sweet. You put a note in there telling him how much you loved him or whatever." She said, "That was a check." She said, "I gave him a check for the cash that was in the safe, but I got a feeling the check ain't going to hold up, because where he's going, it probably ain't fireproof." So we see these sorts of things. It just says, "Moreover, by them thy servants warned, and keeping them is great reward." Who can understand his errors and cleanse me from my secret faults? We all got faults. I got more than I can account for. And when we all get to heaven, if we're having to give an account, y'all are going to be in a long line behind me, and I'm going to be there a while, because I got to try to account for my faults. But we all have them, and we all going to have to stand before the Lord and give that account for them. Now, folks like my mama won't be there near as long, and I recognize that. But she did the best she could with what she had to work with. But here on this earth, it's our testimony that if we keep what David writes about, we keep the judgments and the statutes of the Lord, and when other folks see us, they won't be writing checks and throwing in her casket. And we won't have to worry about those sorts of things, because we know that we've lived as good a life as we could live. We regret mistakes or things we said or things we did or didn't do. But in the end, we're able to look back and say, I'm sure glad that Mom and Daddy drug me to church. And I'm sure glad I was able to read my Bible and understand, because the later we get in life, the more we recognize what's important. And we're able to lay there. Could you imagine laying on your deathbed and wondering what's next? Wondering now what? For some folks, they say nothing. Other folks, when they get to that point, if they can have an epiphany there, then the Lord's promised, whenever you call my name, I'll be there. But think about a life well lived. How many folks do we know that's done that? We all know somebody. And we looked at them and looked at, they preached their own funerals they lived, didn't they? David's saying that's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. And the Lord's laid out these things for us. And it's really simple. You just follow. You just follow and do. All right, where'd Matthew go? Did I lose him? Okay, well, there's your announcements. You can look on your bulletin. I don't know what to do other than just repeat what I hear every week. And if you want to know what's going on, you're going to have to read it. Be sure and remember Brother Paul. I'm sure he'll be back available Sunday, but he just had some sort of crud, and it was affecting the medicines that he's been taking, and they had to be real careful on what they gave him. But continue to pray for the country and pray for some of these folks that, Lord help them. They just don't know. We need to get them in the 19th Psalm, let them read a little. Mike, would you dismiss us?